The New Orleans Saints aren't out from under the salary cap just yet, but with the remaining options they have, they could free up as much as $30 million to spend this offseason. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to be taking a look at my wish list for New Orleans, which is different than the needs list that we covered yesterday. So if you want the needs, go back to yesterday's episode. But if you want the wants, the wish list, I got that coming for you today. We're also going to be taking a look at what real cap trouble looks like and comparing that to where the New Orleans Saints are and the key difference as to why the Saints are where they are and other teams are hemorrhaging talent. And to kick us all off, kind of in the same vein, we're going to take a look at where the New Orleans Saints are salary cap-wise right now based on all of the projections, as well as take a look at all of the contracts that they have left that they can continue to tinker with and just how much money they can free up and how that amount could be enough to help them ease all the conversations around Marshon Lattimore's future. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer and making Locked On Saints your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off of your first order. So the New Orleans Saints aren't out from under the salary cap just yet, but I promise you, they're going to be fine. And they will have money to spend this offseason. Even though I don't think that they're going to be big-time buyers in the first couple of days of free agency. Although when we move on with the show here in just a moment, I'll tell you the one player that I would go out there and try to sign day one if I'm the New Orleans Saints. But look, they're going to have the money to get it done, and they're not far from being to where they need to be by next Wednesday. They're going to be fine. So let's break down where they're projected to be, what moves they have left, and after they make those moves, how much money they'll have, and why that's such a big deal in the Marshon Lattimore conversation. So the first thing I want to look at is how much money they have left to trim. So according to SpotRack, they're at about $15.5 million over the salary cap. According to Over the Cap, they're about $17.3 million over the salary cap. Neither of those sites, though, have Cam Jordan's contract restructure factored in. So if we add in what we think that amount can be, yada, 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 they're sitting at around $8 to $9 million, like north of $8 million. So you would want them to get $9 million or so cleared before Wednesday, just to make sure that they're compliant with the salary cap. Now, that number was backed up as well by Kat Terrell over at ESPN, who's got the same number, around $9 million left to get under the salary cap. So we're in a really, really good place. And the fact that they're 5 days away from that salary cap cutoff doesn't really matter, right? Like 6 days away, however many days it is, right? We're on Thursday here. They have to be under the salary cap by Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. They're going to be fine. There's no such thing as actually not hitting the deadline. You got to hit it one way or another. And it's not like they're actually up against a deadline. It's just that some moves and some reports, things have to catch up. So here's what the Saints have left that they can get done to trim that $9 million down. One thing we know is already on the works, thanks to Nick Underhill over at NewOrleans.football, who put out last night that the Saints and Tyrann Mathieu are working on a reworked deal or reworking on a deal. And that's interesting language because it doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to be a straight up restructure. It could be more than that. I'm not saying that it's going to be an extension but it could be or anything like that. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at is like, it could just be them agreeing to new terms on deals, things like that as a whole. But if this is just a simple restructure, here's how it would work. Tyrann Mathieu's current cap hit sits at just over $12 million. If the Saints were to simply restructure, reduce his base salary down to vet minimum, take that amount, add in his $2 million roster bonus, and then restructure all of that, it would knock and then if they expand it out over 5 years, it would knock everything down to about $5.8 million allowing the New Orleans Saints to save $6.232 million. So if we were to start them off at a flat $9 million over the salary cap at that point, they've got less than $3 million to trim, 2.8. That's where they are. So with the Tyrann Mathieu deal, if it's just a simple restructure that includes his roster bonus, they're already $2.8 million within compliance. So again, they're going to be fine. Now, you want to know what they have left to get done there? Well, Ryan Ramczyk, they could restructure him. That would save them over $11 million. If it's just a simple, basic, standard restructure, right? Alvin Kamara, same thing. Simple, basic, standard restructure saves $8 million. Demario Davis, same thing. Simple, basic, standard restructure would save $8 million. Now, some of those guys have roster bonuses and things like that that would be funneled into all of that. Those are all included in those numbers. So that means that the Saints should then have around $24 million to spend. They could then also restructure Taysom Hill's contract and then save around $6 more million. So they could be as near or as high as $30 million under the salary cap before they're all said and done. And that's pretty solid, right? Like that's a pretty solid place to be. Now, they might wait to do some of this and they might just do enough to get compliant. And then they might worry about the other restructures when they're looking for money to add a free agent or something like that. I don't think that's the worst idea to go about, so that you're only really doing the restructures that you need to do. But $30 million puts them at right around the middle of the pack, just between the Vikings at $37 million available and the Jaguars at $24 million available. So Saints in a really, really good place here when it comes to their salary cap. So I mentioned that doing these restructures as well, and where the Saints are with all this, does kind of aid them in their, I assume, efforts in trying to keep Marshon Lattimore here in New Orleans. We broke down Marshon Lattimore's contract a couple of episodes ago, and one of the things that we highlighted was the fact that once that option bonus fits or settles in the week before the NFL regular season, according to Jason over at Over the Cap, there must be some contract detail there that says that bonus would then automatically restructure and prorate over the course of 5 years. So that would mean that if that's the case, the money spent on a Marshon Lattimore would simply be around another $3 million, basically, that gets added to that base salary of $1.2 million. So you're looking at maybe $3 million that's added on top of that. That's it. So that's great. Like, that works well for what it is that the Saints need to do here and would want to do in terms of trying to keep Marshon Lattimore in the building. So where the Saints are right now over the salary cap, just $9 million-ish, where they would get after a one Tyrann Mathieu rework, if they keep it simple, just under $3 million over the salary cap. And then with the remaining restructures of just Ryan Ramczyk, Alvin Kamara, and Demario Davis, they'd have $24 million saved up. If you add or you plan for Marshon Lattimore to be on the team, you're looking at around $20 to $21 million. That you're still over the salary cap. Like, there's still a lot that you can do with that. And then you still have in your back pocket a potential move like a restructure or potential pay cut with Taysom Hill, depending upon what he's willing to do to help the team out. And that's the way that you have to try to sell that. So Saints, very, very healthy, very, very good in terms of like where they want to be right now. Now, the 2025 conversation is one that we'll have later. We don't even know what the 2025 salary cap is yet, so it's not worth even really paying attention to that. I think people who are like haters, doomers, doubters, like that's what they're going to pay attention to. We're not haters, we're not doomers, we're not doubters here on Locked On Saints, are we? So, the Saints are going to be fine. Saints are going to be fine when it comes to the 2024 NFL salary cap, and they're going to have money to spend. You want to see some examples of what it looks like to not be fine? Look no further than the AFC East. We're going to break down a couple of teams that are making some massive moves because of their salary cap troubles, and we're going to explain why that's different than where the New Orleans Saints are. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The same things that bring home that winning trophy are the same elements that can keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything that you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and, of course, even level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, exhaust kits, and much more. You can find everything that you need over at eBay Motors, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what it is that you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you want at the prices that you need, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that championship. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Today's episode also brought to you by friends at Game Time, the fast and easy way to book tickets to all of your favorite types of events, sports, music, comedy, theater events, and much more. Everything you're looking for near you at the last moment if you wanted to. You ain't even got a plan early on. You can be like me and spontaneously make a decision, and Game Time will have you covered with last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat before you buy them, and their best price guarantee. They take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you want to take all that guesswork out of buying your tickets, I highly recommend the Game Time app right now. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Game Time today. It's last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Once again, that is promo code Locked On for $20 off of your first purchase at Game Time. All right, family, if you think the New Orleans Saints are in cap trouble, I know you don't, but they do. I'm going to explain to you what cap trouble actually looks like and what the deciding factor is, the difference between these teams and the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that you can also check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 national sports stream, the first of its kind over on any channel on YouTube. Also available now on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. That's the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 national sports stream, keeping you up to date with all the biggest stories around the world of sports here on Locked On. So make sure you're going to check that out. I want to take a look now at what real cap trouble looks like versus where the New Orleans Saints are, who just handle their accounting differently. Now, are the New Orleans Saints in a worse situation than they would like to be in right now? Yes. And Mickey Loomis has talked about that a bunch, that like the impact of the COVID year and the $60 million or whatever that ends up getting lost in those situations and stuff like that, or whatever that average was across the NFL in terms of like the boost that they expected minus the actual drop in the salary cap. So I think that like that's still something that this team is recovering from, just like every team around the league is recovering from, but they're recovering from it in a different way. They're still maintaining their accounting and their practices. That's not always the case for teams. So I want to give you the example of the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins, who also started this year's salary, or getting it. You started this year's offseason over the salary cap. By the way, the 49ers, the Bills, the Ravens, the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Dolphins were also all over the salary cap, not just like the Saints were, but were also all over the salary cap. You just didn't hear as much conversation around them because of the amount that the Saints were over the salary cap. But with that in mind, let's look at some of the things that the Bills have done this offseason, some of the things that the Dolphins have done this offseason, where they are salary cap-wise, and what the New Orleans Saints have done cut-wise this offseason, and where they are over the course of their salary cap kind of trend, right? Or where they're trending towards. So now we should say that the Saints handle things differently by giving folks money now, right? By converting money that folks were already going to be paid, but giving it to them in a signing bonus, paying it out over the course of the season. Usually that signing bonus gets divided evenly over the course of game checks per week and things like that. Obviously, sometimes you can maybe have like different negotiations and stuff like that, but that's the thing that the Saints are doing, right? They're taking money that would be paid out and they're basically advancing it, saying, here's your signing bonus, and then expending it over the course, accounting for it over the course of many, many years. The Bills and the Dolphins don't do that. So here's where the Bills are. In the last, let's call it week, but it could be like 48 hours, they have released starting cornerback, Tre'Davious White, one of their starting safeties, Jordan Poyer, center, Mitch Morse, wide receiver, kick returner, and former New Orleans Saint, Deontay Hardy, running back Nyheim Hines, and they have approached and gotten Von Miller, one of their edge rushers, right? One of the best edge rushers in the league, to take a pay cut. The Miami Dolphins have cut starting cornerback Xavier Howard. They're going to move on from him. They moved on from starting linebacker Jerome Baker, and now Christian Wilkins, the stud defensive tackle, is not going to be tagged, and he will at least get the opportunity to test free agency. Now, a key kind of got left under the mat in the Xavier Howard deal. There's obviously a chance that he ends up back with the Dolphins, but as of right now, that's what they've had to move. The New Orleans Saints are set to cut Marcus May. End of list. They're set to cut Marcus May. Now, you could add Jameis Winston onto that list if you want to, but that was always going to be the plan. It felt like going into this offseason. You could add Michael Thomas into that list if you want to, but again, was always going to be the plan coming into this season. So in terms of non-premeditated moves, Marcus May. So now you have to imagine, okay, well, the Bills cut Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse. They got a pay cut from Von Miller. They cut Deontay Hardy. They cut Nyheim Hines. They must have $80 million of salary cap space left to spend. Wrong. They're $9 million over the salary cap. That's me slapping my desk. $9 million over the salary cap. You know who else is $9 million over the salary cap? The team that cut Marcus May. You might think to yourself, well, I mean, if they're $9 million over the salary cap, if the Dolphins were in a better salary cap situation than them to begin with, and they moved on from Xavier Howard and Jerome Baker, and they're not franchise tagging Christian Wilkins, then they must be maybe $5, $6 million over the salary cap. Try 20. Now, some recent moves might not be in these over-the-cap projections and things like that, but nonetheless, where the Saints sit is a much better cap situation than where the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins sit. And what's the difference? I mentioned the ability to say, nope, we're going to pay that out now. You get that as a signing bonus, and we're going to throw that, that's yours now, and it's guaranteed, and we're just going to funnel that down. It's because the Saints keep themselves an allotment that they're able to spend. They have a bankroll. This is where Gayle Benson comes in, right? These other teams can't advance salaries like that. They have to make the move. They have to move salaries in order to make money, right? That's not necessarily the case for the Saints. Gayle Benson keeps everything available to them to be able to move stuff around. Like that's a huge part of what it is to be able to constantly do these signing bonuses and restructures and all these other things. The players don't lose anything when this happens. Sometimes people think about that. They talk about these restructures and they kind of go, well, they're asking all their players to take pay cuts. These are not pay cuts. These are like advances in your paycheck that the team just accounts for differently. Somewhat. That's really like at the most, that's all it is. And it's not that the Saints are paying extra money and interest on this by the time that it's all said and done. They just pay it off for longer. And as they borrow from a future year, they're opening opportunities to spend money in the present year. This is what they've been doing. It's what they'll continue to do. Now, I'm sure that they'll, make a few less moves here and there, or they'll carry a larger bankroll into the season to try to roll some of that over into the next season, all those things. I would not be surprised to see them try to start chipping away. Mickey Loomis talked about it in, I think it was his end of year press conference a year ago. He talked about it and everything. And so like, there's a lot of opportunity for all that. But look, when you're a team that's moving on from starting cornerbacks and starting safeties and starting linebackers and all these other things to get under the salary cap, that is cap HE double hockey stick. The New Orleans Saints advancing payments, moving money down the road to open up money now and moving on from a player who hasn't played but half the games that he's been available for. That is not cap HE double hockey sticks. In the absolute worst, it's cap purgatory. Can it go bad? Sure. Can it go great? Sure. Both things could end up being true, or one of the two things can end up being true. We don't know which just yet, but I'll tell you what, man. One of the other big differences is that the Bills, they've been in the playoffs. The Dolphins, they've been in the playoffs. The New Orleans Saints have to get there to prove that even though all of this accounting is different, and even though they are technically in a better situation, salary cap wise, where they're not offloading talent like crazy, they got to prove that it's all worth it to continue to double down on these veteran players, and they need to get to the playoffs. So is it all absolved? No. Is it better, though, than it could be? 100%. Yes. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at my wish list for the New Orleans Saints and why, even though offensive line doesn't feel like a need anymore, it's still very high on my wish list. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k that you could still have an IRA as well? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you activate Robinhood Gold. But get this, right now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer from other retirement accounts with that 3% match. That's right, and no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gives you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is available now through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Gold Market Research. Investing includes risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of your first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. And that 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We are taking a look at my wish list for the New Orleans Saints offseason. It ain't Christmas, but it sure could feel like it. Appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Coming up tomorrow, would the New Orleans Saints have been better off? We're playing a little game of what if tomorrow. Would the New Orleans Saints have been better off going with a cheaper veteran quarterback last year and trying to invest in maybe a Russell Wilson this year? We're going to discuss why that would have been an absolutely terrible idea in tomorrow's episode. And of course, I'll get you caught up on all the big news around your New Orleans Saints as well in our In Case You Missed It segment, getting you caught up with everything from the week. All right, so the New Orleans Saints, as I mentioned yesterday, have a list of needs. And I think that their list of needs is shifting because of some of the good news that they've gotten over on the offensive line. So I ended up saying that the list of needs for me, when I look at what the Saints need, comes down to edge rusher at the top, possession wide receiver at number 2, and then at number 3, I think the thing that you're looking for is depth on the offensive line. My main reasoning being that you're looking for a major contributor at the edge rusher spot. You're looking for a 3-down starter on the wide receiver spot. And right now, the Saints sound like they're just looking for depth on offensive line. Now, I disagree. I think that they should be looking for competition. I think that they should be looking for at least one new starter on the offensive line as well. So that's why I wanted to give you my wish list today. So my wish list still starts, though, with edge rusher and defensive end. That's not going to change. But honestly, I think that one of the things that's on my wish list for the New Orleans Saints specifically about edge rusher is getting themselves an edge rusher that changes the prototype, that challenges the prototype, that they go for the speed, athletic type of pass rusher as opposed to the speed to power converter type of edge rusher. I think you have those edge rushers on this team. Carl Granderson has shown you how valuable speed and athleticism can be along the edge. Zach Bond, Caden Ellis have both shown you that as well. So that's one of the reasons why, like, whether you're talking about any of the top edge rushers in the NFL draft, for instance, Alabama's Dallas Turner, Florida State's Jared Verse, UCLA's Laiatu Latu, the answer is yes for all 3. But Dallas Turner is the guy that kind of burst that prototype bubble a little bit. So for me, an edge rusher that bursts that prototype bubble and gives the Saints a fearsome off the edge, got a game plan for him, overwhelming speed, potential defensive rookie of the year, defensive player of the year type of edge rusher is at the top of my wish list. At number 2 is competition at left tackle / depth at right tackle. So I kind of lump those both together. Forgive me. Call the cops if you want to. I don't care. But I think you need competition at left tackle, and that could happen at 14 in the draft. That could happen at 45 in the draft. At 14, you could draft depth behind Ryan Ramczyk, a Talise Fuaga, for instance, out of Oregon State. Like, there's a lot of different opportunity to be able to add that kind of talent, whether you want the competition or the depth. But I think that the Saints need to at least get one of those in the building. And even if the plan is 100% to move ahead with Trevor Penning as your week 1 starter, get him some competition and see how that ends up potentially impacting him and furthering his development. Number 3, a new starter at left guard. I think you need a new young starter at at that position. I don't think Andrus Peat's going to be back in 2024. I just don't see it. I don't know how you conceivably turn around and pay veteran left tackle money for a guy that might play left tackle. And then when you have the opportunity to go out there and get a rookie contract at left tackle in the first 2 rounds, and you can say whatever you want to say about the NFL draft. And I always talk about how unpredictable it is and how you'll never know if a player is going to be there or not going to be there. This tackle class is so good that whether you're picking at 14 or picking at 45, you've got a competitive left tackle starter. And you can get a competitive left tackle starter in the league in this draft. There's no doubt about that in my mind at all. Because the class is just that deep. The class is just that good. And there are just so many of those players. So for me, I would go out there and instead of spending a bunch of veteran money on a left tackle, if I'm that desperate for a new left tackle, I go to the draft for it. But I want to find a new starter at left guard. And I don't think Andrus Peat's going to come back for interior offensive line money. And to be honest, he didn't perform consistently that great on the interior. He performed really well last year on the edge at tackle, but if you're putting him back on the inside, then you get him back where he's had all the injuries, where he hasn't been able to stay on the field, where he's been blown up in blocking and all these other things. And then look, I think James Hurst is really good, but I think that the real value of James Hurst is the way that you can move him around. So getting a Max Garcia back can help with that. Maybe Nick Saldiveri is the guy that steps in there, but finding some new starter at left guard makes a lot of sense. You could also go to the market. Dalton Reisner, a guy that Clint Kubiak's worked with before in Minnesota, in Denver. Like these are the guys that could potentially make sense. Find or identify a yards after catch threat at wide receiver. So we talked a lot about possession wide receiver being a need for the New Orleans Saints. Yards after catch receiver is a want for me. And notice I said find or identify. So you can find that person in free agency. You can find that person in the draft. Malik Washington out of Virginia, Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. You can find that player there, or you could identify that talent and build their role on guys that are already in the building, like a Rashid Shaheed. I understand both sides. Whatever mechanism by which you go to do it, yards after catch threat is on the wish list. Possession wide receiver also on the wish list because you ain't got one. Nice and simple. Competition at kicker and punter. How about that? The Saints do this every year. This isn't a monumental thing to throw on a wish list. Like, they're going to do it no matter what. But look, I think that when you look at Blake Grupe as well as Lou Hedley last year as undrafted rookies coming in, they did fine for the fact that they were undrafted rookies coming in, getting their first starts. But did you see in them long-term reliability for down the road? That's my bigger question mark. So the way that I look at it is bring in competition, veteran competition ideally, guys you've seen do it, maybe even a little reunion in the mix. Thomas Morstead. But bring in veteran competition, proven competition to just at least push them further, right? And the Saints do this every year. They always go into training camp with 2 kickers, 2 punters, sometimes more, but 2 kickers, 2 punters at least, to make sure that they're driving that competition and that they have. I mean, look, last year, that's what happened, and that's how Blake Grupe and Lou Hedley won those competitions, and that's why they became the starters. Those weren't guys that just like lucked into those spots or showed up when the spots were open and walked on or whatever. No, they won those spots outright in training camp. But I think you want to push them further in their development. Finally, a veteran backup quarterback. People get mad at me every time that I say this, but I'm going to say it again. I think the Saints should keep Jameis Winston. And everybody tells me to shut my mouth every time that I do that. And I get all these like really gross comments and stuff like that, but I don't care. They should keep Jameis Winston. But I doubt that they will. And I doubt that Jameis wants to stay because he wants an opportunity to go out there and compete for a starting job. I don't know where he finds it, but I wish him well and I hope that it works out. But that leaves a hole for the New Orleans Saints. Jake Haener could be your backup quarterback, but is Jake Haener going to go out there and be able to close out a game for you? Now, Jameis Winston couldn't close out a game for you last year either. There were a lot of different reasons for that, but not the least of which being quarterback play. So I think you need to find, identify, and go out and get a veteran backup quarterback that if they need to step in this new system that could potentially win you a game. Now, a lot of people are talking about Sam Darnold. I don't think Sam Darnold can win you a game. I've never thought that Sam Darnold can win you a game. But can he come over and help you translate the system for your starting quarterback? Yes. So I think you got to find yourself a backup quarterback. Like the more injuries that are like last year was every year we come off going, well, last year was the year of backup quarterbacks. Do we not see the trend here? Like quarterbacks are getting hurt more and more and more. Players are getting hurt more and more and more. And a lot of it is just being more receptive to injury as the NFL. Finally, hello, welcome to player safety. Remember that conversation that they tried to start and never finished? I think that like that's a big part of it. So you have to have that veteran backup quarterback that can go out there on the field for you because there's just no guarantee you're going to be able to get your starting quarterback out there for every minute of all 17 games and potentially soon to be 18 games because the NFL hasn't had enough of a problem keeping talent on the field. But oh, the almighty dollar. So veteran backup quarterback is the last one on the list for me. So my wants different than what I think the needs are, but I think both have some validity. So let me know what you think. What are your wants for this team versus the needs that the team might have? All right, y'all. I appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Pelicans and Locked On LSU. Jake Madison over at Pels, Caroline Fitton over at LSU, bringing you everything you need to know every single day. So make sure you go and check them out for your second listen today as well. Thank you so much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.